Give it a few seconds. All right. I think we are live here with Vinod. Vinod, welcome.
Hey, Sávio, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, man. I'm doing great. I'm here speaking to you from the countryside of Portugal, traveling with family and friends, having a lot of fun here. And yes, and how about you? Where are you speaking from?
So I am in Bangalore, India. Bangalore again is known as has been known as the Silicon City of India, and now also one of the most hottest startup centers in India. Actually, so I'm talking from Bangalore. It's evening here. Weather's nice today. It's not rained. It's been raining the last few weeks. Actually, it's intermittent rain, but it's lovely weather out here. And I'm sitting in my office at this, it's 5:30 in the evening here.
Amazing, amazing. Listen, thank you very much for accepting the invitation. I think storytelling is something that we both are passionate about. It's something that we've been working on for a few years. In your case, much longer than I've been working with storytelling. We have a lot of similarities in the work we do, and I think this is going to be a super relevant conversation for all the founders, leaders out there that are trying to incorporate storytelling in their communication, in the way they do business. So I'm super excited about this conversation. So thank you again for accepting the invitation.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Let's do it. Let's do it. I want to get out of the gates here with you, Vinod, by addressing the problem, right? So we all know storytelling has become super popular over the past 10 years, I would say. A lot of people talk about it. A lot of people share content about storytelling on LinkedIn and Instagram. But I have a feeling not many people know exactly the problem they're facing. And on top of that, they don't know how to tackle that problem. So, since you are a specialist in the subject matter, I want to pose this question to you. What do you think is the challenge founders, startup founders, business founders are facing in terms of bringing storytelling to their daily lives, to their work?
Oh, lovely, lovely question to get started with. Uh, this is a very common problem that I see all around. So way back, when I launched my advertising agency way back in 1991, 92. So that was about 34 years ago when I started my own advertising and design house. And one of the problems I saw there was, while it was advertising and marketing, people would try to sort of write good copy, or write good stories out there in print media that I used to handle. But when it came to actually telling the story, they could outsource it to a good copywriter. But when it came to, let's say, the sales team going and pitching to customers, or the leaders going and pitching the product to customers, there was a huge gap even at that time. And what I saw there was, it is basically how people communicate. So a lot of the storytelling and the understanding of story comes from our the what we see around in terms of movies or entertainment or probably books and maybe even advertisements. So it not much is visible, I would say, or was visible in the past when it came to storytelling used by leaders or people pitching. Very, I would say when Steve Jobs actually launched the iPhone or even the iPod Touch is when people really opened their eyes to storytelling. So I would say storytelling has been around for a long time, but the understanding of storytelling, I always call it the storytelling iceberg. What is visible above is very visible and attractive and shiny, is all our, the marketing stuff that happens, or probably even the books and the entertainment and drama and all of that literature. There's plenty out there which is visible. But when it comes to incorporating, let us say I need to incorporate storytelling in my communication or in my professional space or in my entrepreneurial space, how do I sort of do that? I think there have been umpteen number of books, but that gap is still existing today. That is because people tend to sort of fall into using a lot of facts, data to sort of communicate their messages. And they believe that, and again, we as humans, we have two sides of our brain: the logical part, and the non-logical part is what I would call it. So we tend to sort of fall into the logical part of it, and go with data and facts, and we want to sort of convince other people through data and facts. And why should you buy my product? Why should you join my team? Or why should you buy into my idea? Is because here's the data. Here's what research says. Here's what my findings are. Here's what other customers are doing. Here's the results of my test, or my product testing that I have done. So people want to sort of see data, otherwise they don't believe. But when it comes to story is a different thing. How do I sort of present these facts or communicate these messages using story as a vehicle? I think that is missing actually. People do not understand that story means I have to either entertain somebody, or story means I have to cook up something, I have to imagine something. Most times stories is actually a vehicle for messages to be sent across and help somebody understand what I have in my mind. I always see story as a vehicle, and I think that understanding is missing, is what I feel. And that is where the gap is created, and people struggle. They don't know how to sort of get warmed up, get started, and they have built their habit. Communication is a habit. It's a thinking process, and I communicate based on the way I think. So how do I break, if I want to change my communication, how do I break my thinking pattern? I think that is the difficulty I see. And I think, that's one of the things that we have been working on massively, helping people think differently so they can communicate differently. Think in terms of story, so you can start using stories and storytelling. Yep.
I love that you mentioned or you described storytelling as a vehicle to convey an idea, because I totally believe in that. And it is true that people, they don't quite know how to use storytelling as a communication tool. Although we've been seeing, a ton of literature, even if you go back to the 70s with Joseph Campbell, and then more recently with Donald Miller and other authors, even Seth Godin. We spoke about Seth Godin the other day in one of our conversations. So a lot of super well-known figures these days, they talk about storytelling, but people quite not understand how to put that in practice. And I think this conversation between both of us here today, it'll be also useful because of that, or for that, to help people understand how to use storytelling, because it's already proven that it's the most powerful vehicle, as you put it, to convey ideas, to access other people's minds, and actually help them to tell stories in their minds and to make decisions. So I want to move on here to the more practical side of things, Vinod, because I want to really leverage your experience here in this conversation. You've been working with big brands, right? Cisco, Walmart, and other important brands, globally speaking, but also in your country, in India, helping them to use storytelling as a powerful tool. So what can you tell us in terms of leaders and startup founders and business founders using storytelling? What has been their main handicap? What has been their main challenge? And how do you help them to overcome that challenge?
All right. Yeah. Yeah. So I would look at organization, probably put them in two buckets. One is the startup world, where the dynamics are very different, the setup is different, the priorities are different, the focus is very different out there. And one is the mid to large enterprises. They're already established. They are running businesses and they're growing. They're bringing in revenues. They've got large businesses running. So these two are different, ecosystems. So when we'll just look at the startup ecosystem actually. So when you look at the startup ecosystem, you have people who are on a 0 to 1 journey, where they're trying to sort of launch a product or get their MVP in place. They're trying to sort of put together their idea and say, bring it to reality actually. Bring it to some form that they can actually go and take it to market, try out how customers actually accept it, how does the market respond. So that they're trying, they're in that phase. Or startups could already have gone through the 0 to 1 journey, and they are in a growth phase. They're trying to sort of get into customer acquisition, expansion, maybe even expand, across markets, or expand their product line itself. So when you look at it, that's the startup part of it. The enterprise or the large, mid to large companies or the established companies have a different set of problems out there. Both have communication problems. The 0 to 1 journey, the communication problem there, I think one of the most critical things out there is how founders are able to bring storytelling to play. How are they able to communicate their idea to their different audiences? And most times when you look at 0 to 1, what I've come across is a lot of them are either bootstrapped. Most of them are bootstrapped. They're trying to sort of build their initial product, their MVP, their idea, and move from there and try to take it out there. Maybe take help from an incubator, maybe take help from certain ecosystems or support systems that have been set up. So there, the focus is on the product. Focus is on trying to solve a problem or get their idea that they know that something is missing in the market. They know that something is missing in the customer's life or in the customer's business, and they want to sort of address that. I think that is what they focus on. The focus is heavily on the product at that point in time. Now, many of the startup founders are also looking for investments at that point. Maybe they want to sort of, get some funding at that point in time. Now, what I see there is the gap that I see there is the story that they have when it comes to hiring their first employee or a team member, or going to their trying to pitch their idea and the concept to their prospective customers, and trying to sort of raise funds. They go with the same pitch deck and the same story. The pitch deck doesn't, most of the times it lacks a story, actually lacks a good narrative, and they use the same thing with different audiences. I think that is the first and foremost problem that I see out there. They do not know how to adapt it to different audiences in a different way. What a team member or an employee, a would-be employee, prospective employees wants to join the team, how do I tell the story of that? How do I tell the story to a prospective customer and probably a prospective investor? These three are different audiences. Their needs are different. Their motivations are different. The way they look at the opportunities are very different. So I have to tell the story in a different manner. What I convey about my startup is going to be very different, because that is also a positioning issue. When you see, a lot of the founders I see over here, that I've met, very, very amazing people, fantastic ideas, fantastic, concepts. They're trying to they've got their products many times in place, but the biggest issue is they don't know that they need to adapt to different audiences differently. So that is one problem in the startup ecosystem. And I see the same thing when they go and try to raise funds, or they're in a growth phase. They don't know how, the next challenge that comes up is, I'm expanding my team, I'm expanding across regions. Now I have more people. Now I have to create leadership out there, because I as a founder cannot be there all the time. I need to create that next level of people who can, even if it's 1 or 2 people, or it could be a slightly larger team. Who are these leaders who are going to help me sort of claim my bandwidth to sort of grow the business? I think that switch is a issue again. They're not able to sort of, identify the right talent to sort of take charge. Most times what I've seen is people who have been there from day one of the startup are promoted into leadership roles. We've had a recent issue also. We've been seeing a lot of these instances where they're very good people, good team members, extremely dedicated, extremely talented, but are they leadership material? Do they know how to tell the story and sort of align teams to the opportunities that are coming up in the market, or how to sort of leverage the growth phase that they are in? How to sort of work through innovative ideas and start building on the base products that they already have? I think a lot of that requires leadership, and that requires storytelling actually there. And I see that as a gap again. So 0 to 1 journey, there is a founder, storytelling gap. Then how do I sort of identify the right talent and sort of align people, tell the right story, and sort of get the narrative right in terms of aligning the leaders, next set of leaders, to scale up and deliver to the organization's aspirations. On the enterprise side, on the large companies, again, what I see is there's hierarchy out there. So while senior leadership usually understands the business priorities, as you start moving down one or two levels down, or two, three levels down, people miss the understanding of the larger business objectives. They're very siloed in their thinking, and it becomes a task, a routine, where I'm going into those meetings to just present my status updates, to just go and finish and tick things, saying, oh, meeting, I'm jumping from one meeting to another. I'm doing a product review, I'm moving to the next status review meeting, I'm looking at a budget meeting. So I'm just moving from one to the other, and I'm not focusing on storytelling at all. Where that starts hurting them is, we've seen these issues happening where executive level leadership folks are expecting their senior leaders, senior managers, when they come into meetings, are they able to add value? Are they able to enable decision making? Are they able to sort of tell the story quickly? And I've seen people coming with 50 slides of data. Senior leadership doesn't want to see that. They want to know, hey, what do you recommend? Tell me that. I need a 30-second story at this point. I don't have the time. I have a lot of decisions to make. We have lot of stuff that we need to sort of address over here. Now, can you tell your story in 30 seconds? So people don't know how to tell the story there. So it's all a communication problem that I see, which is, right from a very small fledgling startup to some startups in a growth phase, or a small, mid, or large enterprise. I see that storytelling is something which is people struggle with it all through. I see that as a challenge.
Amazing. I love what you said, and there is a lot to unpack there. So I want to break it down in probably two or three pieces here, Vinod. You mentioned storytelling as a tool that we can use in different stages or in different levels of maturity, right? As a startup, as a big business, as a company which is going from 0 to 1, or as a growth stage company. And I totally agree with that. I think we need to tell different stories in different stages of our businesses. You also talked about storytelling in such a powerful way. It reminded me of Steve Jobs' famous quote, when he says that the most powerful person on the planet is a storyteller. I'm sure you're familiar with this quote. And the reason why he says that is because, and another person who reinforces the same message is Yuval Noah Harari, famous writer from Israel. He says, the people with data, the people who understand data usually works for the people who understand stories.
Yes. Yeah.
So storytelling is something super connected with leadership, as you put it before. And I've been working with startup founders for a few years now, and I see almost on a weekly basis people, they understand the function of storytelling. They totally agree with us, right? If they're here right now, they'd be nodding positively, agreeing with us. They know that they need to use storytelling in order to differentiate themselves from the competition, in order to connect more meaningfully and emotionally with their target audiences, either be clients, investors, strategic partners. They know all of that. But then when they go into the world, they don't use storytelling. Or I should say, they either don't use storytelling, or they use it in a not very efficient way. And I have an assumption for that, and I want to share it with you. My assumption is that they're not using frameworks. They are letting it out to happen by accident instead of being more intentional
Yes.
on telling these stories. So I like your opinions on frameworks. Now I like your working style. So I wanna know your opinion about this. How important are frameworks for people in those two different stages that you mentioned before? Um, Startup stage and growth stage. And also, if you think highly experienced people still need frameworks, or they can just go with the flow and let it go naturally. What's your take on that, Vinod?
Yep, yep, lovely. When it comes to frameworks, there are, I would sort of say the approach probably, has to start from the individual first. Uh,
Hmm.
One of the important things is, if I do not understand story, what story is, and I can't think in story terms, I cannot identify when stories are being heard outside. I don't notice stories when conversations are happening. I can try and use a framework. It becomes like I have got a framework, and I've got a template and I'm filling things in. But when I have to be the storyteller, the framework is important for me to sort of put a structure to it. But how do I be the storyteller? How do I read the audience? How do I know I'm going fast or slow? Should I, go into more details to build the context of the story or the conflict in the story? Or should I make it very quick and concise? What is the timing of my story? All of these are outside of the framework, is what I see. The framework will sit there, will help me sort of structure it. It sort of helps me think in a very methodical manner. But I think a lot of things around will impact how I'm going to deliver it. Because if I cannot read the room, if I cannot know that, oh, this story is landing, or I think I should probably pause here and probably connect with the audience in a different way, if I'm not able to adapt, a lot of these factors are going to impact my results. So storytelling is not just, it's not, frameworks are very critical, I would say, but you also need to sort of build the other pieces around it in terms of, and I would say it starts from self-awareness. And when I am in a meeting, or when I'm in a conversation, when I'm on stage, or when I'm in pitching to an audience, how aware am I at that point? What is my awareness of how my audience is responding? What is the awareness of my own self? How am I breathing? How is my pace of speaking? And most times it is not possible to be completely aware. Maybe I record myself and take a look at it. I start paying attention to how I'm breathing, and I don't have to do that during the live session. Probably I need to do a practice of self-awareness, practice of breathing, practice of vocal techniques, practice of noticing how people respond to different communication signals. I think a lot of that is very critical when it comes to becoming a storyteller. Frameworks are very critical. That provides that I would say a sort of a shell, around which you start building the other elements. Yeah, that's how I would look at it.
Super interesting stuff. And I usually say that more important than the startup itself, now talking about startups, is the founder behind it, is the human being behind it. And when you talk about storytelling, in that sense of self-awareness, reading the room, knowing who you are, knowing what's landing, what's not landing with a certain audience, I can't help but think about storytelling for personal transformation. And it's not really in the script here today because you're talking about storytelling for leaders and for businesses. However, since there is always a human behind the business, I think it's worth asking you to tell us a little bit about your work with storytelling for self transformation. Because at the end of the day, if the founder, if the person, if the business person is not feeling positive, feeling empowered with who they are, I have a very strong feeling they're not going to tell a very compelling story. So, what have you been working on behind the scenes in storytelling for personal transformation? If you can share a little bit of it with us, Vinod.
Yes, yeah. So one of the things, the way I look at you know people in professionals, or people in business, or founders, while that is the role they play, they're also humans behind that. So as a founder is a title, or probably CEO is a title, or a leader or manager is a title, but they are humans. So what is happening with them is not just about what is happening on the business front. their whole, the way they think, the way they sort of live life, the way their outlook to life is, the way their mindset is, the way they tell, the stories to themselves. I would call them personal narratives. The narratives they have are the ones which actually make an impact in the way, or are going to impact the way they're going to communicate with others. So here, I want to sort of call out the differentiation out here. So a lot of the, people are approaching storytelling from, let us say, I want to learn storytelling. You can learn storytelling as a skill and say, hey, these are do's and don'ts. Here's a framework. Do this, apply this. This is how you build your presentations, and go and do this. Make eye contact, deliver. Okay, all of this is good. Those are skills that you can pick up. But I would sort of say a more powerful approach is to build the identity of a storyteller. A skill is something I can pick up. I can learn to, cook a meal. I can learn to work with a new software. I can learn to build a product. I can learn to drive fly an airplane. Maybe those are skills I can build with practice. Storytelling also is required. You require practice. I would say the approach needs to be start with the how do I become a storyteller? The moment you take that approach, you're starting to think of, how am I thinking? What's my perspective of the world today? What is the way I am, my belief system is? What are the thinking patterns that are, either allowing me to connect with people well, or they're probably disabling me, or limiting me from actually, unleashing my potential? I think a lot of these internal narratives have to start coming to the fore out there. I think that differentiation is very important. If you're really looking at building yourself as a storyteller, now as a founder you can be a storyteller. Now as a manager you can be a storyteller. You could be in, a product lead, you could be a storyteller. You could be a customer service agent who is picking up calls, or on a chat board, you could be a storyteller. So a storyteller's identity is one part. The skill is a different thing. Skill is something you can pick up very quickly. You can read books and pick up some of the skills and adopt it and all of that. But as an identity, I would say that is where the personal transformation part also comes in. What is the baggage I'm carrying when I'm, especially when I'm communicating with different audiences? Now, am I coming across confidently? How do I feel about myself? So there's a lot of going in and checking what my personal narratives are, what is internally happening, inside of me. How am I sort of, looking at things? How am I describing things? What is the meaning I'm giving to things? What's the story running inside me? I think that introspection is very critical. And when it comes to personal transformation, becoming aware of even those, some of those narratives makes a huge difference. I just want to share, one personal thing that I've been working on myself for about 25 years right now. So especially when it comes to personal transformation, I've experimented. So last year I've been into, long distance running for the last many years. So I signed up for a 72-kilometer run in the Himalayas last year. So that's the first time I have, I signed up. It took me 3 weeks to actually hit the register button. I would go to the website and say, hey, am I ready for this? Is this something? Am I overreaching something? So I'm aware of these narratives that are running inside my head. And where is this narrative coming from is what I spent time on. Becoming aware, allowing it to sort of surface. And then in 3 weeks, I actually went and registered. And last year I completed that. And I built a narrative for that. Now, for me to transform from being a full marathoner to an ultra marathoner, running that 72 kilometers was a huge challenge. Again, you go up, you climb a mountain basically there. You go all the way up and come down. That's a lot of altitude gain and things like that. So what I had to do was to transform myself by using narratives, using storytelling techniques. So I use that to transform the way I define that run itself. It really made a huge difference. I was able to sort of complete it with 3 hours to spare. So I think that made a huge difference for me. And I've seen I've used personal, transformation, techniques or approaches even at workplaces. We see this happening in every workshop where somebody wants to sort of, is not vocal, for example. There everybody sitting but is not willing to sort of share their thoughts. Something is stopping them, and there is a personal narrative running, or there is probably a belief system which is stopping them somewhere, saying, hey, I'm not comfortable voicing or using my voice, sharing my thoughts. What would other people think about, if I am, maybe somebody is going to laugh at me. So it can be limiting. And if this, I've seen people with 18, 20 years of experience unable to voice their opinions in workshops. And I'm sure the same thing happens in meetings, when they want to avoid conflict. They don't want to sort of antagonize some of the stakeholders. So they start sort of shrinking rather than really opening their ideas and putting them on the table. How do we sort of, that's where we sort of bring in, a lot of the storytelling techniques, which are much more personal, and bring about the transformation out there.
Wow, what an amazing story. And I totally see that happening because personal transformation stories, they are contagious, right? So when you tell a story about running a marathon, climbing a mountain, inevitably people will connect to that story. And that's going to prompt them to take an action or to at least think about something. So super powerful. I remember coming from Australia to Portugal on my recent transition, country transition. I arrived in Portugal after the pandemic, early 2022. So I had no connections. Uh, I had no professional connections, that's for sure. I didn't know where I was going to live, and I wanted to start life again. But I didn't know how difficult it would be to do that because although I had my previous experience back in Australia as a communication skills coach and also work in other areas, when I arrived in Portugal, nobody knew who I was. So why would people trust me? Why would people, invest their time, money, and attention in hiring me? They had no reason to do that. But little by little, I was traveling the country. I'm super proud to say that today I have visited 67 locations in Portugal in only 3 years. But back then I was, starting my travels here and telling those stories on LinkedIn. And then, kind of surprisingly to me, people started reaching out, started sending me messages, started approaching me on LinkedIn, requesting video calls. And that's when I started getting traction and getting my first clients here in the country. So it's a little bit of a personal transformation story, I believe, and I want your opinion on it. And that prompted people or triggered people to take an action, which was to contact me.
Yes.
So is that the case? Personal transformation stories, they have this superpower of touching and connecting with others.
Yes, yeah. So when you look at it, that's a lovely thing that you shared out here. So it is not just about moving from one country to another, one region to another, and then starting again. From, I would say, starting from zero there, because nobody knows you. Now you have to establish credibility, establish yourself. And there is a personal transformation out there, because it is not just you. We're not machines who are just moved from one location to another and plugged in and we start functioning. We are emotional beings. So how, and we're thinking beings. So how do we sort of look at the world? How do we think about ourselves? How do we sort of build those narratives? How do our belief systems work? Oh, this is a new place. Am I comfortable here? Are people friendly? Oh, I said hello to somebody. Somebody may not have responded because the culture is different. So now, for me, that's going back to the learning curve. So I'm trying to learn and adapt, and try to sort of adapt and look at how people operate out here, how people think out here. Now I have to unlearn and relearn a lot of things. So that is the personal transformation element that is there. I see the same thing happening with startup founders. Now, a
Hmm.
lot of startup founders that I see have worked in the industry for quite a long time, quite some time. There are a lot of young startup founders too, but they have had some industry experience. Now when they want to sort of get out of a job, of some role they have been playing, and move into a founder's role, there is a personal transformation that is going to happen, because nothing is guaranteed. Nobody is saying, hey, your next paycheck is going to come here, your next customer is going to paying customer is going to be here. You need to go and bring about a shift in the way you're going to approach the world, the way you're going to look at life itself. I think that transformative element is very much existent. That's why I do not sort of differentiate when people say work life balance. I say, hey, who are you at work? Who are you outside of work? You're the same person. You're only trying to put a title and maybe a different costume and try to play a role. But what is the set of beliefs you bring? What are the narratives you bring? What are the stories and experiences you carry in life? It's the same person. Now, you're trying to demarcate it for some useful purposes, but how are you performing? How are you saying this is stressful and outside of work? Oh, I'm waiting for the weekend. Weekends are not stressful. Now, that's a narrative that I see people, use to sort of limit themselves or to manage or balance something. But when it comes to founders, if let's say they have been they have been working in organizations, now that requires them to break those, known boundaries that are there, or known rules that are there. Now they're like you moved out from Australia to Portugal. That is breaking all of the known things. You all of the givens that were there, you've broken them and you moved into a new thing, and that requires personal transformation. That automatically takes you on a personal transformative journey.
This makes total sense to me, Vinod. And I've been talking to a lot of investors over the past 24 months because of my work with founders. I also facilitate qualified introductions with investors, and I try to understand, the mentality of our investors so that I can help my founders to connect with them. And one thing that I've listened over and over and over again from investors is, I don't necessarily invest in the startup or in the solution. I invest in the founder, because the solution of the startup can be tweaked, pivoted, changed many, many times,
Yeah.
right? We live in a world where you have access to countless tools, resources. It's all there on the internet. However, the founder, if he's not coachable, if he doesn't know how to be resilient in the tough times, if he's not adaptable, he or she is not adaptable, and not willing to change things, nothing's gonna happen. In the first roadblock, in the first obstacle, they're gonna crumble. So what you said, it makes total sense. So what we are actually talking about here is that, and then please correct me if I'm wrong, founders, entrepreneurs, they should dedicate some time to think about their own personal narratives, even before thinking about sales, thinking about networking, thinking about engaging with investors. They should step back and go into this deep reflection about who they are in the first place and where they want to go. Is that the case?
Yes, yeah. So I see this as sort of a discovery many times. Many of the founders that I've interacted with, it's a discovery, self-discovery actually for them. So when they're starting with certain narratives, certain ideas that they have about how they're going to sort of, that's a vision basically. That's a vision story that they actually have. This is how the world will be different, or this is how my customer's life will be different, or this is how this problem will be solved. This is the product that will actually make a difference in people's lives. So they already have some vision already. That's a vision story already there. There are narratives around that story already there. They already see a sense of problem for which they know that there is a solution, or that the product they're building is going to be a solution. Now, when it comes to the personal narratives part of it, as they start going through that entrepreneurial journey and the startup journey, they start discovering a lot of things about themselves. There are narratives that shift, or certain new things that they discover about themselves. And I think it is it's very important to sort of take time, especially founders in the initial stages, to take time to introspect, to understand what is happening. And I think it's not easy. I would say it's not easy to sort of do it by yourself. It's always nice to have a support group, it's probably nice to have even one or two other people who are sort of in the same journey, or maybe a mentor who can sort of help you, be the sounding board, be a mirror, and reflect, help you reflect on what are some of the discoveries that you've made. Many times we, as founders, all of us have those blind spots. We will not be able to sort of understand in many situations, say, hey, what is the narrative that I am actually approaching this my product development with, the market with, the way I'm thinking. How do I bring about a shift? To bring about a shift, I need to be aware of the way I'm approaching things, and for that I need somebody to help me reflect and introspect. So I think that, support system or the ecosystem where somebody else can sort of, be there. And most times when you actually see, that's the beauty of storytelling. uh, if somebody has to tell a story, there has to be at least one listener. That's the same thing with founders. So if I am going to understand my own self, a little better as I go through that journey, I need somebody with whom I can have the conversation, somebody who's going to at least listen. No, don't have to give me advice, don't have to say right or wrong, but at least allow me to sort of voice it, put it on the table, and somebody is listening to it. Just pure listening. I think that is a huge that makes a huge difference. Now, it is not just at the beginning of the journey that the personal transformative element comes in. As I said, it's a discovery. So as they go through various challenges, as they go through, people accept, people say, hey, this is a great idea. Yeah, can you show me a demo? Somebody says, hey, can you deliver next week, but my product is not ready. Or somebody says, no, this is not going to work. How, that's a discovery of my own self. How am I going to deal with all of the, the hopes and the rejections and the possibilities and everything that is going to open up? How am I going to sort of navigate through that? I think that is where the discovery sort of happens, the personal transformation, or I would say a lot of the discovery happens through that particular journey. So it's not just at the beginning. I think it's a process actually.
Wow, that's beautiful. That is super, super inspiring. Founders in general, as you know, they go through lots of, challenges and tough times and death valleys, as they call it. And I don't think many people know that storytelling could be one of the tools to help them get out of those moments by telling those stories and connecting with the right people. I personally like one of these storytelling concept, which is a concept of the three most important stories of anybody's lives, which is the story we tell ourselves every day when we wake up in the morning, the story we tell others, and the story people tell themselves about us. And when these three stories are coherently aligned, we get into that flow state.
Yeah.
Things start to happen. Life gets traction. We attract the right people to us, the right opportunities. So as you were speaking there about personal transformation, I couldn't help but think about this beautiful concept. Let's move on to your work now, because I want to ask you, how do you help founders nowadays, Vinod, to tell better stories and to get better results as a consequence of telling those stories? How do you format your work and how do you deliver it? Could you walk us through your work system a little bit?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. There are two ways we work with founders. One is workshop mode. Workshop usually have different founders coming in, and we sort of help them, you know, go through the journey of understanding story, adopt story thinking, and embrace the identity. Start embracing the identity. I would say it's a start, embracing the identity of a storyteller. So, and how they can incorporate storytelling, how they can get started when it comes to their startups. And the other mode that we work on is one-on-one coaching. So we have done coaching for founders. They want to sort of work on specific problems. So we have worked in, there are two kinds of problems that they usually come to us with. One is, hey, I want to learn storytelling, I want to better my storytelling, I'm trying storytelling, I understand it, but I want to sort of improve and enhance my storytelling abilities. That is one. The other is they have a specific use case, saying I have an important presentation coming up, or I've been pitching to my prospects, but I don't think, I've got my pitch deck ready, I've got everything, but I think I'm not really, making that mark out there. I'm not hitting it right. Or I don't know. My timing of my story could not be okay, or the way I'm applying some of the principles are, I don't know if I'm really applying it right. So there's again coaching that is required in both of these cases. Sort of helping them sort of better their presence and presentation as a storyteller. The other is to sort of adopt it and become a better storyteller. So these are two coaching scenarios that are there. That's usually one-on-one, and a lot of them are workshops, where workshop mode is where there are multiple, founders, different founders who actually come together to sort of, we work with incubators. We've done work where, founders from different regions in the world. We've had founders coming to India to invest, or rather bring their product to India to sort of open their offices and start really getting into the market here. But before that, they want to know how to tell the story in India, basically, in this region. So we've had some of them who are from different regions wanting to do that. So we've worked with founders that way. We work with founders in various, right from tech to non-tech to agriculture to I'd say even the social sector. So we work with founders across. We've helped them sort of, and again, there are two parts which I want to sort of look at here. We have something called the story strategy, or the core narrative of their startup. So that is something which we feel that, very critical for founders to, sort of frame that, put that together, and that will sort of help them get clarity, because that's the place they're going to, sit and operate from. The core narrative will be the foundational element. All their strategies, when it comes to their product strategy or the market strategy or their hiring strategy, everything is advised by this core narrative. This core narrative will sort of help drive that. It's a very strategic work that we do with founders. The other is to build the storytelling abilities of what kind of stories do you actually have to have handy. How do you sort of storyfy your pitch and presentation when it comes to different audiences? How do you tell your story of your organization or your startup? Let's say you have a 30-minute presentation, how do you tell that? 3 minutes or 30 seconds? How do you make it into an elevator pitch? Or how can you go into a full-blown detailed presentation but tell the story through that? So these are different formats that we actually work with. So as I said, workshop and coaching are two ways we sort of do that.
Oh, that sounds super interesting. I'm sure it's super relevant to any founder out there. I also believe that although India is a highly populated country, if somebody wants to break into the market with a new product, a new solution, there aren't many people better than you to help them in terms of telling the story in India. So I want to ask one final question to you, which is basically, what would be a message, you can send to founders, startup founders, but also leaders in the corporate rooms around the world about the ability of telling stories? What would be your final message to all of them?
So I would just say, one thing, do not try to learn storytelling. I think we are already story beings. We are naturally storytellers. We have moved away from it, actually, because of the way we operate with the world, our professional context. We think people expect this, but in fact, the way we connect as humans is through stories. Stories are the only way we are actually, interacting with people. We share stories. We meet people. We are sharing stories. Maybe we're not exactly in the storytelling format, maybe, but in our own ways, we are all storytellers. I think that awareness, that's a good starting point, that we are already storytellers. and we have forgotten that we are storytellers. And I think, how do you get back to becoming that storyteller that you were? As children, we were listening to stories. We grew up, as storytellers. We were able to tell what happened at school today, or what happened at the workplace today initially, and after that we started going through the motions. Or let's say I'm having ideas. I was excited about certain ideas. I tried to talk about the ideas, but I did not get a response. So I forgot that maybe I need to go with data and facts and a lot of the stuff which are important. But I forgot the story. I put the story aside and started relying on a logical approach. I think that, you know, realizing that we are story beings and going back to that is I think that's all that is required, is what I feel. That's a great starting point to start reclaiming our identity as storytellers.
Amazing. Vinod, I really, really appreciate your time and your generosity sharing your knowledge with us today. I feel very privileged to be here talking to you and, learning from you. All of these about storytelling. How can we use those concepts in our daily lives, in our work, and um, in our daily routines with our teams. So thank you very much again for your time, and I'm looking forward to engaging with you in more conversations about storytelling in the future. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Savio. It's been a pleasure interacting with you. I think we've been connected for more than 2.5 years now. So it's
True.
it's I'm so glad we continued our conversations through this live session, actually. And wonderful to actually get to know about your journey there and the kind of work that you're doing with founders. And I'm sure there's a lot more exciting stuff that we can look forward to, mutually in both the regions, I should say.
Absolutely, absolutely. Let's tell more stories and see how we can connect, the Indian market with the Portuguese market in the
Yes,
future.
absolutely. That'll be
Thank
exciting.
you very much. Thank you very much,
Thank,
Vinod.
thank you. Bye bye.